Welcome to Lore of the Ring, where we uncover the hidden roads of Middle-earth and tell the tales that Tolkien never wrote. Before we begin, take a moment to let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time of day or night this narration has reached you. The white stone gleams cold beneath a sunless sky. Through the empty corridors of Minas Tirith, wind carries only whispers of doubt, of abandonment, of a throne that sits vacant while darkness gathers at the gate. The banners that once flew proud now hang torn and faded, their white tree emblem barely visible through layers of ash and sorrow. Picture this moment. The greatest city of men stands at the precipice of history, its people looking eastward not with hope, but with creeping dread. They wait. They have always waited. For generations, the stewards have ruled in place of the king, their eyes fixed on distant roads, searching for a figure that never comes. And now, in the hour of Middle-earth's greatest need, that waiting has become unbearable. What if the king never returned? What if Aragorn, son of Arathorn, ranger, warrior, heir of Isildur, failed to claim the throne that was his birthright? Not through death in battle, though that shadow loomed over every step of his journey. Not through cowardice, for no man who walked the paths of the dead could be called craven, but through some other twist of fate, a hesitation, a doubt, a refusal of destiny itself. The question hangs in the air like smoke from distant fires. Minas Tirith stands on the brink. Behind its walls, Denethor broods in his tower, his mind already half consumed by despair and the lies whispered through the Palantir. Beyond the Pelennor fields, the armies of Mordor mass in numbers beyond counting, their siege towers and catapults assembled with terrible purpose. To the north, Rohan struggles with its own demons, its king only recently freed from enchantment, its people scattered and bleeding. This is no mere academic exercise, no idle speculation for scholars safe in distant libraries. This is a meditation on fragility, on how the fate of the world can turn on a single choice, a single man, a single moment when courage either rises or fails. Tolkien understood this deeply. His entire legendarium speaks to the weight of individual action, the terrible responsibility of those who bear the blood of kings and the burden of prophecy. In his letters, Tolkien wrote of the importance of the eucatastrophe, the sudden joyous turn that saves everything from ruin. But what happens when that turn never comes? What happens when the thread of hope, stretched so terribly thin, finally snaps? The streets of Minas Tirith would grow darker still. The laughter of children would fade to silence. The forges that should ring with the sound of swords being made would cool and rust. And in the east, beyond the mountains, an eye would turn its full malice westward, seeing at last a path cleared of obstacles. And without him, who would lead the realms of men against the gathering darkness? To understand what would be lost, we must first understand what Aragorn represented. He was not merely a warrior, though few in the Third Age could match his skill with blade or bow. He was not merely a leader, though men and elves alike followed him into impossible odds. He was the living embodiment of continuity, the last thread connecting Gondor to its ancient glory, to the days when Elendil the Tall raised the kingdoms of the Dunedain in Middle-earth after the fall of Númenor. The line of kings had been broken for nearly 1,000 years. After the death of Eänil II in the year 2050 of the Third Age, his son Eänir rode to Minas Morgul to answer the Witch King's challenge and never returned. No heir came after him. The crown was left unclaimed, placed instead in the keeping of the stewards, who ruled as regents for a king who might never return. But Tolkien makes clear in his appendices that the line of Isildur continued in the north, preserved in secret, hidden among the rangers of the Dunedain who guarded the wild lands from the shadows. These northern chieftains kept alive the old ways, the old blood, the old hope. They married late and lived long, longer than other men, and in their veins ran the blood of Númenor undiluted by lesser lineages. Aragorn himself was marked by this heritage. Born in 2931, he was 87 years old during the War of the Ring, yet moved with the vigor of a man in his prime. He had walked Middle-earth for decades, serving under different names, Thorongil in Gondor, Strider in Bree, learning the ways of his people and his enemies, preparing for a destiny he both longed for and feared. Gondor, meanwhile, had declined into a shadow of its former might. The kinstrife of the 15th century had torn the kingdom apart. The Great Plague of 1636 had depopulated entire regions. The loss of Ithilien, Osgiliath, and finally Minas Ithil, renamed Minas Morgul in mockery, had pushed the kingdom back to its last bastion. The blood of Númenor had grown thin among the common people. The nobility married for alliance rather than heritage. The old wisdom faded. Prophecies spoke of a king's return. The most famous came from the elf woman Malbeth the Seer in the days of Arvedui. Over the land there lies a long shadow, westward-reaching wings of darkness. The tower trembles, to the tombs of kings doom approaches. The dead awaken, for the hour is come for the oath-breakers. At the stone of Erech they shall stand again and hear there a horn in the hills ringing. Whose shall the horn be? Who shall call them from the gray twilight, the forgotten people, the heir of him to whom the oath they swore? From the north shall he come, need shall drive him. He shall pass the door to the paths of the dead. These were not vague utterances. They pointed specifically to Aragorn, to his northern origin, to his terrible journey through the paths of the dead, where he would command the oath-breakers to fulfill their ancient pledge. Without him, these prophecies would remain unfulfilled poetry, beautiful and tragic and utterly useless. But prophecy in Tolkien's world is not deterministic fate. It is potential. It requires individuals to step forward and claim their roles. Aragorn himself doubted. In Lothlorien, he told Gandalf that he would not enter Minas Tirith as anything but its king. Yet he also knew the danger of claiming kingship too soon, of appearing as a usurper when unity was most needed. His wisdom lay in timing, in understanding when to remain hidden and when to emerge. What if that wisdom failed him? What if doubt turned to paralysis? What if the burden of being the last of his line, the final chance for the reunited kingdom, proved too heavy? Gondor would face the enemy without its true heart. Yes, there would be brave men still, Faramir, Imrahil, countless soldiers willing to die on the walls. But they would be defending a kingdom that had lost faith in itself, a realm led by a steward driven mad by despair and dark visions. The ancient strength that once held back the shadow would crumble not from without, but from within. Tolkien wrote in his letters that the tale of Aragorn and Arwen was central to the entire story, that their love represented the hope of men elevated by the wisdom of elves, that their union symbolized the healing of old divisions. Without Aragorn's ascension, that union would fail. Arwen's choice to remain mortal would become not a triumph but a tragedy, a sacrifice without meaning. Without the rightful king, could Gondor withstand the shadow alone? In the darkness of Barad-dûr, the eye sees. It does not sleep. It does not blink. It searches eternally across the lands of Middle-earth, probing for weakness, for the ring that was stolen from its master, for any sign of the movements of its enemies. And in our darkened timeline, in this shadow path where Aragorn fails to claim his throne, the eye sees something it has long desired: a kingdom divided against itself, leaderless, ripe for conquest. Sauron's strategy has always been patient. He is ancient beyond the reckoning of men, a Maya who walked the earth before the sun and moon were kindled, who learned craft from Alla and corruption from Morgoth. He understands how power works, not merely the power of armies and siege engines, but the power of fear, of demoralization, of turning an enemy's strength into weakness. Against a united Gondor led by the heir of Elendil, bearer of the sword reforged, he would need to commit vast resources. But against a broken Gondor, a kingdom drowning in despair, the siege of Minas Tirith would unfold with terrible efficiency. Already in Tolkien's narrative, the forces of Mordor nearly succeeded. They broke the gates with Grond, the great battering ram named after Morgoth's mace. They filled the Pelennor fields with orcs, trolls, Haradrim with their Mumakil, and Easterlings in their thousands. The Nazgul wheeled overhead, breaking the courage of defenders with their fell cries. Only the arrival of Rohan, the revelation of Aragorn with the banner of Elendil, and the desperate valor of Gondor's defenders turned the tide. Strip away Aragorn, and the arithmetic of battle changes completely. Consider the psychological warfare first. Sauron's propaganda would emphasize Gondor's abandonment by its ancient line. Whispers would spread through the city. Where is the king who was